Hello, and welcome to 2025 UAF Arctic Innovation Competition, presented by Usabelli Coal Mine. I'm Adeline Berry, a marketing major at the UAF College of Business and Security Management and the captain of the UAF swim team. I'm truly honored to be your MC this evening as we bring AIC into your home. We appreciate all of the creative ideas submitted to AIC. However, after preliminary screening rounds, only 10 submissions have made it to the main division semifinals for ages 18 and up. You will hear 5 of those ideas tonight, and they will all be competing for cash prizes up to $15,000 and 4 kicker prizes. We have an expert panel of judges joining us today, and I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Jim Cully, representing the Mount McKinley Bank, Brian Holst, joining us from the Juneau Economic Development Council, Justin Seavey, representing our presenting sponsor, Usabelli Coal Mine, and also a UAF alum, David Sandberg from Respect Engineering, and also a UAF alumni, and 2 new judges join the AIC team. We have Emily Winfield, an engineer from Design Alaska, who will be the proxy for Jack Wilbur tonight, and Melissa Ray from GCI. The UAF Arctic Innovation Competition awards over $45,000 in cash prizes and awards, and could have not happened without the generous support of many sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, Usabelli Coal Mine. You are all invited to the 8-Star Event Center at 1 p.m. on Saturday, April 19th for food, door prizes, and the final round of presentations. Since 2009, AIC's founding sponsors have supported our innovation and economic development mission. These include AEDC, Design Alaska, Doyle Unlimited, FEDC, Kinross Alaska, JEDC, and Northland Bank. Alaska 529 supports the Cub and Junior divisions. These provide 7 education-free savings plan scholarships at $2,000 each. The Classroom of the Future Award will go to one K-12 teacher who incorporates AIC in their classroom and will be announced at the finals and award ceremony. Kicker prizes are supported by the Educational Legacy Fund, Alaska NSF, EBSCOR, Mount McKinley Bank, and Respect. Competitors are also eligible for kickers in the top 4 cash prizes. Do you want to vote for your favorite ideas? Fan favorite voting allows you to select your favorite idea in each division. Recipients will receive $100 and a unique Lego trophy. Thank you, Chris Maroc, Allstate, for sponsoring this award. So please cast your votes once daily, starting at Saturday the 12th and ending at noon Friday the 18th. Now let's get started with the presentation. Each competitor has 5 minutes to present their ideas, followed by 5 minutes of questions from the judges panel. First up, we're going to have Matthew Beer, who's presenting breakaway electrical plug adapter. Now, once you're ready, give me a thumbs up, and once the timer starts, you can start your presentation.
Good evening. I'm Matthew Bearer, and I'd like to tell you. Okay, good evening. I'm Matthew Bearer, and I'd like to tell you about my invention. Throughout the Arctic, people plug in their vehicles to keep them warm. However, most people have at least once driven away without unplugging their vehicle. Forgetting to do that means that you could break the cord, the plug, the outlet, or you could lose the cord entirely. My device is a solution to all of those problems. Next. The way it works is you put the breakaway adapter in between any 2 standard plugs. It works with 2-prong or 3-prong plugs, and currently there seems to be nothing on the market that does that. Next. Next. So the breakaway plug has 2 parts that are held together mostly by the force of attraction of a magnet and a plate. Under normal conditions, it is going to be held together by the magnetic force, but a quick tug will separate it safely. Next. It's best if you break it intentionally, but it will work if you just drive away without doing it. As a safety feature, the 2 halves of the adapter are designed so that you can't use just 1 half, because that would defeat the safety feature. Next. If you like, you can even leave the halves on your cords, waiting to be replugged as soon as you get home. Next. Now, originally, this was designed as a way to help people with the driving away with the plugins attached problem, but it does have broader applications. This would be good for any situation in which you could accidentally damage something by pulling too hard on a cord. So some common problems that could be reduced, people tripping over cords that don't break free, appliances being tipped over, broken outlets, broken plugs, appliances being pulled off of platforms. Next. My prototype was built by modifying existing plug adapters by adding magnets and washers. The benefit of this approach is that all the components are currently in mass production, and that'll make it very easy to begin producing my device. Next. The main thing I had to do was modify the prongs to reduce friction. Next. A small amount of 3D printer filament was used to create the covers for the adapters and to hold the magnet and the washer. Those covers, though, would not be necessary in the mass-produced version because the adapters themselves would be modified to hold those things. Next. The retail price of the raw materials in my prototype was about $7. So I think with mass production and bulk purchasing, the final product could be sold for probably $10 and still make a profit. I think people would be willing to pay that price to avoid the problems that driving away without unplugging can cause. My device would be an economic benefit to a company that already makes electrical plugs because for minimum extra cost, they could offer a new product. My device would be an economic benefit to the user because for the small cost of the device, they can eliminate the cost of replacing cords, repairing damaged cords or outlets or broken devices. The last thing I'll mention is that when I was designing my prototype, I went with the idea of making the fewest possible changes to existing products. If a company were to try to build my device, I have more suggestions that could take it beyond this to make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Judges, are you ready to ask our competitor some questions? Each judge will ask a question in particular order. Jim Cully will start the questions, followed by Brian and then Melissa.
Starting. So I had a quick question. One of these things that always seems to pop up with plugs is those don't always break like straight out. It's like at an angle. So having the prongs like that, does it bind up a little bit? I mean, I understand the friction part, and I kind of always thought those were in there to make sure there was a better contact, but things never just come straight out. They usually come at an angle or turned or something like that. And so how does this perform when it's bound up like that?
That's exactly one of the changes I would make if I were going to have this built from scratch. I think it would be better to make it so that it unfolds a bit when it comes out, as opposed to just pulling straight out, because as you say, they never do pull straight.
Okay.
Thanks. Great idea. My question is, I think this product already exists to some degree, right? I think you can, because when I read yours, I looked up breakaway pull, and actually there's a product called something very similar. So help me understand how this is novel and different than what at least one other quick Google search identified for me.
So yeah, I did see that other company too. VoltSafe is the one I found. Their product is far more complex. They advertise it as the most advanced system for plugs, something along that line. It allows you to do remote monitoring of power usage. It allows you to do remote control of the device. Mine is simple. It's a physical product. It literally is just a dumb adapter. The only thing it does is come apart easily after the magnetic force is exceeded. So if you wanted to do all those other things, you should get their product. But if you just want to protect your vehicle from driving away, mine's way simpler and be a lot less expensive.
And that's what I was going to ask. What's the VoltSafe product? But perhaps that's the one that you had just mentioned, the one that we found on the Google search. My question is, you talk about kind of modifying the prongs to reduce friction and modifying the adapters. Is there any danger, issue of fire, or any dangers anybody needs to be concerned about, you know, when we're talking about electricity? And by the way, we also have this problem in Anchorage and all over, not just Fairbanks, but I appreciate this invention.
So if it comes apart, it's no more dangerous than any other open plug. So when it's together, everything is covered up just like any other plug. The only thing that's different is that I've reduced the friction on the prongs, and I did that two ways. One is that I used a Type D adapter, which is an Indian style, because they're smooth cylinders, as opposed to flat plates with widening, ends. I spent a little time in India. These things just are a lot slipperier than American plugs. So also they're not confusable with American plugs. So that's why I chose that as the modifying feature. So they, even without modification, they slide more easily. But if you open the prongs in the receiving side, so that they still make good electrical contact, you can reduce the friction even more. And then the force of attraction between the magnet and the plate, they make up partially for what was lost, so that it will hold together safely when the cord is hanging on it on the vehicle. But magnetic force drops off rapidly with distance. So if you separate this by a millimeter, it quickly comes apart the rest of the way. Whereas a friction-based plug has roughly the same friction force all the way off.
Thank you.
Are there any concerns about moisture, any different than weather, snow, affecting the connection?
It's the same as with a regular plug. If water gets into your regular plug, it's a problem. Same here, but no extra problem.
Clever idea.
Thank you.
The magnetic piece particularly, and appreciated that explanation about the distance, how it weakens quickly and makes that connection come apart rapidly. I see that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. So our second presenter this evening will be Simon Evans, who will be explaining the idea of permawall ground cooling technology. Now, once you're on here, once you see your slides, please give me a thumbs up to start the timer. Our slides will be there really quickly. Just give us 1 second.
Can you hear me?
I got you. Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. We're just pulling up our slides one more time. Sorry, they got unshared really quickly. Perfect. All right. You should be good to go whenever you want.
My name is Simon Evans. I'm a PE registered in the state of Alaska. I have 25 years of experience working throughout the state. Today, I'm going to tell you about permawall ground cooling technology. It's a cost-effective and sustainable solution to mitigate permafrost degradation and thermal erosion in earth retaining structures, such as retaining walls, seawalls, and embankments. Next. What's the problem with melting permafrost? Well, as you can see in this photo, when you have ice-rich, silty permafrost soil, especially on a slope, when it melts, it can run away from the freeze front, and then causing subsidence of the ground in its wake. Next. This photo shows a riverbank erosion site. You can see where the the guys are standing on the road and the truck is parked on the road. And in the background, you can see in the middle there where the road is. And to the right, just by the windshield of the truck, you can actually see the airstrip for the community. Next. So I returned to the site 6 months later, and from the same spot took the picture, and you can see the road's gone. There's approximately 50 feet of erosion occurred in just 6 months after the permafrost in that bank melted and the water came up and scoured away the soil. Next. This picture shows a failing retaining wall. This retaining wall is actually holding back that embankment. On top of the embankment is the community water tank. And so if there was a catastrophic failure of the retaining wall, the soil embankment could fail, causing failure of the water tank as well. Next. What's been happening with climate change and the warmer air temperatures is the existing passive cooling methods have begun to fail. Like you can see in this picture, the thermal siphon just isn't working. The footing's sitting elevated off of the ground because the ground is basically subsided. The embankment's slipped away from the building. Next. So here in our case study is a water treatment plant in northern Alaska. Fortunately, in this case, we already have the solar power plant in place to provide power for our active cooling system. But you can see in this picture what happened was this embankment next to the facility basically started the permafrost, the ice within the soil melted. The embankment started to sink, and you can see there's a pipe there that's like a couple feet off of the ground, and then you can see the solar gain on that southwest corner of the building, which is really causing the soils to melt. And coincidentally, this facility has thermal siphons, but they just can't keep up with the summer heat. Next. On the interior of the plant, you can see the differential settlement. So on the right side is the side where that embankment has been settling and basically subsiding. Next. In this picture, you can see this is a completed installation. We installed the permawall ground cooling system with the cooling coils and the insulation. It operates during the summertime when we have that solar resource to provide power for the system. The heat that's removed from the ground is injected back into the plant, so it provides better economy. We regraded the property here, added some fill material. We put cocoa mat and seating on top of that, and we were able to use locally available fill here. Even though it's a frost susceptible material, it really doesn't matter because we keep it frozen. And here we extended the life of the facility by over 10 years. Next. So in conclusion, Permawall offers a climate change resistant solution. This is a sustainable design that allows for temperature monitoring and a data-driven operation, making it efficient and cost-effective. System operation and ground temperatures are remotely monitored, and they provide complete control of the ground temperatures. And as I said before, the heat captured can be injected back into the building, increasing the overall efficiency of the system. It can be installed in a modular fashion, so you can add onto it as necessary, and you can power it using renewable power or regular power, whatever works out best for the project. In most cases, you can use in situ or locally available soils, which that way you don't need to import any material. And who benefits from this technology? Basically, the entire community benefits because it's a water treatment plant. It can be used for any other infrastructure in a village. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Simon. Now let's see what questions our judges have about your idea. David, Justin, and Emily will be asking the questions this round.
Well, thank you, Simon. Appreciate your presentation. And as a fellow engineer, I can appreciate the design and thought that went into this system. I know there's a few solutions out there. And like you said, with increasing temperatures, it's kind of pushing the envelope on what's still going to work. I had a question on, it seems like kind of a flat loop system, flat loop thermosiphon system, but is this just using a chiller or what? How are we getting the ground refrozen?
So yeah, well, first of all, we're not refreezing the ground. We're working with already frozen ground, so that reduces the amount of energy that we need to actually inject into the system. And then for that particular system, I used a chiller. It was about a 2,500 watt system.
Thanks.
And then the orientation of you said a flat loop. It depends on, each situation is going to be different. So you're going to orient the ground cooling system, use of different materials. I mean, there's a lot that has to go into the design, basically.
Thank you, Simon. So I think I have two questions. My first question is, it looks like your case study, you were retrofitting an existing building. So is this system intended to be deployed on existing buildings to correct problems, or is it intended to be a new design standard for foundations?
So it could be used for both. Right now, the client base that's willing to, take a chance on installing one of these systems would be somebody with a problem that they can't find another solution for. So that's why I was able to find an existing problem and resolve it using this technology.
And is it, functionally, is it similar to like a thermosiphon system and just better? Like, are you dealing with a circulating coolant, and you just have more volume, more heat transfer capacity, or is it a functionally different operation?
Yeah, so it's an active cooling system. So basically, you can control how much cooling you need. Basically, you're removing heat from the ground. So you can monitor the ground temperatures with thermal probes. And then based on that data feedback, you can either ramp up the system, or if you don't need it, you can just turn it off.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Simon. I had a question about refrigerants used in the system. Do you have refrigerants used? I assume at the chiller.
Yeah, so basically what I'm using is propylene glycol. So it's a non-toxic, non-hazardous material that circulates throughout the ground loop. And then inside the chiller, there's a different, like a 128, R128A, or whatever the fluid is. So it's basically, there's, two cooling cycles, there's a heat exchanger, and then you just dump the heat off. In this system, I used off-the-shelf technology, right? So I just purchased a chiller, and so it was just dumping the heat off in air. But you could do like an addition, if you had a massive project, you could do a liquid-to-liquid heat exchanger. And so then you would have basically 3 loops, right? Well, you'd have 3 separate loops. So you have the one geothermal heat loop going into the ground, and then you have your loop in the chiller, and then you'd have another loop where you would collect that heat and use it elsewhere.
Okay, so since your main heat transfer medium is the glycol, you don't have a concern with refrigerant phase out impacting the feasibility of your project in the future?
No, and then plus we have complete control of the system. So I know what the system pressure is and the temperatures and all that data. And so if there was ever a pressure drop, we could immediately turn the system off and then just put a siphon on it and suck it out. And and suck all the fluid out of the loop. But if you had like a real concern with like spilling glycol, you could put a secondary containment system down.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation. Any more questions?
I have one quick follow-up. Got just a couple seconds. Approximate rough order magnitude cost and cost to operate.
Well, operating costs would be free if you're using a solar power source. And then that system, we spent a lot because I did a geotechnical investigation, but about $100,000.
Thanks.
Great job, Simon, and thank you, judges. So now before we move on to our next presenters, we'll take a moment to highlight our kickers, which award $2,000 each. First up is the well-known Arctic kicker, sponsored by Respect Engineering, who specializes in innovating mission-critical solutions that enhance client success through integrated consulting and IT services. the Alaska Student Kicker, sponsored by Mount McKinley Bank, which is the oldest and largest local financial institution in Fairbanks. NSF Alaska EBSCOR sponsors the Climate Adaptation Kicker. They were created in 1979 to identify, develop, and best use a state's academic, science, and technological resources. And lastly, the Sustainability Kicker, sponsored by the Educational Legacy Fund. The Educational Legacy Fund supports organizations involved in public and STEM education, experimental environmental education, and sustainable business degrees. The top 10 ideas compete for these 4 kickers, and so now let's get back into those last 3 presentations for the night. Keith Cox, Pedro Bertimes Filho, Courtney Capps, and Jessica Lincoln are up next with the expanding electronic biomarker tools for fisheries and citizen science. Now remember to watch your countdown clock. Once you see your slides, please give me a thumbs up to start your timer, and the virtual stage should be yours.
Okay. Hi, my name's Keith Cox. I'm the Chief Science Officer and a co-founder of a company called Biolume Technologies in Juneau, Alaska. And that company manufactures a small electronic device that monitors the degradation and quality of seafood by measuring its electrical properties and how they change over time. And so what we're doing with this project is we're adapting our electronic seafood reader for fishery science and outreach. Next slide, please. And the reason we're doing this is the current methods are slow, expensive, and limited. I work for National Marine Fisheries Service here in Juneau and worked in the Bering Sea. I've been up in the Arctic. I've been all over the place. And the methods really, they vary from either being a blood test or a genetics test, which have, highly specified reagents and SOPs that you have to follow. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have like population dynamics. And a lot of times those are too insensitive and they're too late. The graph you're looking at on the right, as the line goes from blue to red to gray to yellow, you're seeing a decline of the salmon population. And that's when the red flags are going off, is when you see the escapement goals not being reached on the Yukon and the Kuskokwim rivers. And so what we're doing is we want to be an in-betweener. We want to have a device that allows people that are connected to their natural resources to, to participate in data collection. Next slide, please. And the novelty of this is we are using electricity. Everything has electrical properties. Bodies do, cells do, and molecules do. And when those systems changes, so do the electrical properties. And I published a paper when I was at University of Alaska, and I was measuring fish as they migrated up the Yukon River, all the way from Ammonok up to Delta. And we were measuring the electrical properties and how those things changed. And it's a simple to use device, and that's what makes it novel. Anybody can use it. You can touch the side of a fish, and it takes a measurement just by pushing a button. Next slide, please. And the feasibility of it is when we started our company, we were in a perishable food item space. And so we made this small device. There's a picture of it right there with a single button. It Bluetooths to a mobile app where you can add metadata to it. And then you can also plug in different types of electrodes to it. And so our fisheries one for the seafood just has 4 prongs that hang off the bottom. But that data plus the metadata then goes to a database system and then to a data analysis dashboard. Next slide, please. And this is a little snippet. We've measured over 300,000 fish in Bristol Bay alone. And so these are some of the metrics that we gathered in the metadata, the different districts, the different species, the different times, the temperatures, all kinds of different things. And so the feasibility of it is we've already done this. We've connected the data flow all the way from start to finish. And now we just need to elevate it so it's more useful for fisheries managers. And currently we have some pilot projects going on with NOAA here in Juneau, as well as the Yukon Delta Fisheries Development Association. Next slide, please. And so this is the company is scalable. And so we're starting with fisheries researchers, but we want to engage in people that are connected to, their aquaculture products or their agricultural products or moose or deer or anything where people are connected to their resources. And we want to make this available so that data can be used by resource managers. Next slide, please. And who is this valuable to? It's valuable to the fish itself. Wouldn't it be great to know that our fish populations are becoming sick rather than waiting for the population to die off? It's valuable for our kids. You know, our kids can participate in this, our fishermen, our subsistence users. And it's incredibly valuable for NOAA fisheries. If we could get better data in more remote locations that are inaccessible by research scientists at NOAA as well as ADF&G. Next slide, please. And so by transforming this proven seafood sensor into a non-lethal real-time research tool, we want to empower resource managers, scientists, and communities to fill that critical gap of data collection that can be used by resource managers. And that's all I have. Any questions, please?
Lovely. Good job. So now Justin CV will start the questions, followed by David and then Emily.
Well, so thank you very much for your presentation. I think this is a really unique and interesting idea. And I think the two questions that I have, you mentioned the methods that are out there. One is very costly and takes a lot of time, you know, working with the reagents and the SOPs and the protocols. And the other is very much a lagging indicator. And so I think my question is, does this instrument fill a new data gap, or does it just allow us to get the data quicker?
It's a new data gap.
Okay.
And when I was at NOAA Fisheries, you know, we published it. No, I was at University of Alaska, and there's a metric called phase angle they were going to use it as an electronic BMI, and that's what our paper was around. And sure enough, you know, the fish that migrated up the Yukon River, you could see that their phase angle was going down and down and down. And here's the most interesting thing I think I've seen in the last 10 years. When we measured the ventral section around the vent up in Delta, the phase angle was the same there as it was down in the Bering.
Wow.
You know, because all the energy was holding the treasure in, which is the eggs and the melt. And so I would say it's a new metric to measure health and condition of fish.
Well, and I think the fact that it's non-lethal is very, very interesting. Have you had any opportunity to test the data that this instrument collects against more conventional methods to know that you're getting accurate information?
That's the tricky part. And so, yes, the paper that we published, we compared it to obvious things where the health and the condition would be less, like midwinter versus spring versus summer versus fall, you know, upstream versus downstream, you know, starved fishes versus well-fed fish. But in terms of like a baseline bench top standard, there really isn't one. Like, you guys probably are familiar with AOAC standards. There's not an AOAC standard. Fat doesn't track well with health and condition. People try and do rotundness, you know, how big around the fish is, you know, the weight versus length. And so that has been something, but we haven't really looked at blood tests. And so that might be something that we would look into for a better baseline, you know, comparison.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm next. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This is way out of my area of expertise, so I apologize if my questions seem a little out there, but kind of looking at it from an economics perspective. So I'm not too familiar with this industry, but what are we looking at in terms of like the savings to the end user per year by implementing this technology? I mean, assuming it gets rolled out to market, what would that look like?
The savings per user per year. And so our food level device is about $800 per year. And that's, you know, and so when we change it around for the fish, I would suspect it's going to be less than that. And so you're talking about $500 per year compared to sending someone from fishing game to Rampart on the Yukon, to measure something. I mean, it would be, and I'm not a business guy, I'm a science guy. And so I'm looking at like the cost from Fairbanks to Rampart, compared to having someone in Rampart be able to capture a fish and then take some measurements and then release it. So I think it would be a big difference.
Just real quick, would specialty training be required?
We train hundreds of people in Bristol Bay, and they're from foreign countries. A lot of them speak English as a second language. And so we've been using videos, and we send somebody up there, and the training's really pretty minimal, to do it. It's about a 30-minute training to get somebody to use it.
Thank you.
Quick question for you. So some of your target clients are government entities. Do you foresee any challenges becoming an approved vendor, or how do you plan to tackle that?
Well, we had a really great opportunity. We were applying to SBIR grants through the National Science Foundation. And once you get into the SBIR program, then you don't have to go through the competitive process at the government. But now all the government stuff is kind of in limbo. And so we need to reevaluate that. But I was government, and so I understand the hurdles that we need to go over.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely job. All right, up next, we have Rudra Patel, who is showcasing the psych map of quantifiable psychiatry. Please ensure that we can see your slides and give us a thumbs up to start your presentation once we get you in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, I'm Rudra, and I'm the founder of PsychMap, where we are revolutionizing psychiatric diagnosis through AI-driven EEG biomarkers. Next slide, please. So usually when you go to a psychiatrist, right, you sit down, you get comfortable, you have an open conversation about what's going on with your life, what your feelings are. But the problem with that is that it's very subjective at the end of the day, because you decide what you want to bring to the table. So let's say you have depression and you also have suicidal thoughts. But if you're not comfortable with the psychiatrist, then you won't share those suicidal thoughts and they won't be able to help you. And the psychiatrists themselves will also have inherent biases where they might not actually understand what's going on. And in fact, the misdiagnosis rates for a bunch of different disorders are extremely high, where the psychiatrists will actually misdiagnose what's going on. There's just very subtle differences. So at the end of the day, psychiatry is the only field in medicine, or one of the only fields in medicine, that doesn't really rely on a quantifiable, like biological biomarker as a test. Like if you do a blood test, you take your blood samples and it's sent it to a lab. There's nothing like that in psychiatry. So just a couple of statistics: 970 million people are affected worldwide through some sort of psychiatric disorder. And this causes a whole bunch of misdiagnosis rates. And usually when you see a patient, clinician, you see over the course of multiple years just to get to the initial correct diagnosis. And this also leads to a huge economic burden of over $200 billion. Next slide, please. So our solution is PsychMap, which is a novel neural decoder, which is able to analyze EEGs using artificial intelligence for 16 different disorders. And it has an overall average accuracy of 96.3%. And this is through just a 5-minute EEG. And this reduces misdiagnosis rates by 58%. And at the end of the day, transforming psychiatric diagnosis into quantifiable biomarkers. Next slide, please. So a bit more into the technology. So how it's working is it's taking this 5-minute EEG. So EEG is just this like a device you can pick up, picks up the electrical signals of your brain, and it's running it through two separate machine learning algorithms. There's the CNN, which is a convolutional neural network, and that's analyzing the spatial feature patterns. And then there's a bidirectional long short-term memory model, and that's looking at the temporal patterns. And it's going through this denoising and artifact rejection. And at the end of the process, it's giving me a diagnosis of what's actually going on. And at the very end, I added interpretable AI. So I wanted to understand what's actually going on, what the model is thinking is the most important feature in making the diagnosis, so that was added as well. Next slide, please. Now, this entire market is really large, so I am trying to target this $137 billion cognitive diagnostics market. And this is comprised of over 230 million patients, especially in the developed market. And this is a very a blue ocean opportunity because this is the only innovation out there that's quantifiable. And I'm hoping for like a multi-tiered SaaS model so that I can target more diverse healthcare providers. Next slide, please. Now, a couple of my competitive advantages again, with the overall accuracy is 96.3%, which is 20% higher than traditional methods. Traditional method means just like a verbal conversation. Some of the individual accuracies examples are like PTSD. I had 97.5% accuracy, and schizophrenia at 96.2%. The diagnoses do occur in minutes, right? Because you just wear the EEG for 5 minutes compared to weeks or even months. And there is the explainable AI component. So the doctor will actually understand what the device is thinking is the reason. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the actual, I guess, the business model. So it would have to, in the enterprise section, it's going to be $120K a year. You would have unlimited scans. Professional would be $60K a year up to 2,000 scans, and specialist 24K a year for 500 scans. And I would have strategic partnerships with each, again, to integrate these different systems and the EHR systems. Next slide, please. This is just my go-to-market strategy, going through FDA and through the research programs, and then full commercial launch hopefully by 2026. Next slide, please. This is a bit about our revenue growth, and I believe time's up.
That is good job, Rudra. So are you ready to answer some of the judges' questions about psych map? You'll be going by Jim and then Brian.
Oh, I get to go first, huh? All righty. Well, hey, quick question. So it looks like you took existing tests, but it really, your new invention is how those are being read and incorporated. Is that correct? Is that how I'm understanding this?
A little bit close. So usually when you go to a psychiatrist, it's just going to be the verbal conversation. You don't usually do the EEG, like where this captain like gets the data from that. So my process was actually taking this EEG because just reading the waves, like electrical waves, is really hard to do. I was able to train a machine learning algorithm, which is able to identify the different patterns that exist for each disorder. And based off of that, I'm able to create the software that you can use.
Okay, so it's the software reading those things then to give you a diagnosis, correct?
Right.
Is that what I'm? Okay,
Mhm.
right. Just trying to fully understood how this was working.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, Jim, if I can jump in. Thank you. This is very interesting. And as we know, AI in our world is really causing a lot of concern and some fears across different industries. And so I'm interested to know, how are you going to position this or talk to psychologists, psychiatrists, medical offices to be able to use this in their practice without feeling like it's replacing, because we all know their billable rate is how they make the money.
Right. So how I'm thinking this would be integrated and into healthcare is that, like, usually when you go to like your family doctor or just any doctor in general, they take your vitals, right? They take your blood pressure, your heart rate, etc. I think this can be used in that regard, where every couple of visits, this could be like the patient could wear the EEG, and the psychiatrist could just get like a quick baseline of what's going on. If it's the initial visit, maybe they could get an idea. Maybe the person has XYZ disorder, so when they're asking the questions, they could have like leading questions. So they might understand what might be going on, and then it could be used as a progression method. So every maybe, I don't know, 10 or 10 visits, they could just put the EEG on again and see if there's any improvements or if there's anything else that's going on in the brain.
Thanks, Rudra. This is fascinating. So who did the training of this device? Is this, and I asked that question in part to understand if you did the training, that's great. If someone else did the training, what would stop somebody else from immediately producing the same product?
Yes, so this was so the A model was trained on a data set of 945 patients that had these 16 different disorders. All of them went through the 5-minute EEG, and I was able to take that data and train the machine learning algorithm off of that.
Excellent. So do you have any ownership of that result, or could
No,
somebody
so
else
it's
replicate
not
that?
my own data. It was like a public data set. So anybody in theory could like work on it. Now, this is the only multi-disorder model. There have been other models that have done just like depression in normal patient or like PTSD normal patient, but the accuracies even with those like individual disorders have been very low. So in that regard, that is one novelty of it.
Is there a way that you've envisioned how to improve the accuracy over time so that you can stay ahead of competitors?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is to have more data and more diverse data. So the more diverse data I have, the more applicable it'll be towards different populations. I definitely want to have my own data to work with, so that it would be, first of all, my own data. I don't have to share it online, and it would improve the accuracies. Second is the actual like technical part of the model. I want to see how I can improve the actual algorithms that I was using. The combination of the CN and the BioStim is the first time done in like literature, but I want to see how else that could be improved.
And do you have a range of patients or a range of people? Are there any certain ages in your test studies or in your cases? Are we talking about a certain population, kids all the way up to the elderly, or just middle age?
So the data set that I had, the population was mostly young adults. But of course, like I said, the more diverse data set I would have, the more applicable it would be towards different populations.
It's so exciting that you could contribute in a meaningful way to people's mental health diagnosis. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good job. We currently are trying to get our last competitor, Bobby, to come connect. However, we're having some issues there with the Wi-Fi. So please do just hold on for one more moment as we wait for him. Okay, we will be now changing it up, and so we will have to see with Bobby after this. But we're gonna end it now and say thank you to all our competitors. It's a massive deal to make it into the AIC semifinals, and we appreciate all of the hard work and creativity you've put into your ideas, and you all did a very fabulous job presenting. So please tune in tomorrow evening at the same time and the same place for our next presentations. And do not forget to vote on those fan favorite ideas once per day before the finals and awards ceremony. So thank you all and have a good night.